A second chance at life. Ned finally awakens, and everything changes. The machines surrounding Ned Quartermain's hospital bed have finally stopped their frantic beeping. For 3 agonizing days, the Quartermain patriarch lay unconscious in the intensive care unit of General Hospital, his family hovering between hope and despair. But on this crisp November morning, as the sun streams through the hospital windows, the impossible happens. Ned's eyes flutter open. The first face he sees is Olivia's. His devoted wife has barely left his bedside since the moment he collapsed outside Bobby's diner, victims of a massive heart attack that nearly claimed his life. Tears stream down Olivia's cheeks as she reaches for his hand, and for a moment, neither speaks. Words seem inadequate for the magnitude of what they've just endured. "Welcome back, my love," Olivia whispers, her voice trembling with emotion. Ned manages a weak smile, his hand tightening around hers. "I'm here," he says, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had occupied his throat for days. "I made it." Within hours, news of Ned's awakening spreads through the Quartermain mansion like wildfire. Brooklyn arrives at the hospital in tears, throwing her arms around her father despite his weakened state. She can barely speak, so overwhelmed with gratitude that her father survived. Behind her come Michael, Christina, and the rest of the extended family, all united in their relief and celebration. "Dad, I was so scared," Brooklyn confesses, holding his hand as she sits beside his bed. I thought we were going to lose you." "I know, sweetheart," Ned replies, his hand gently stroking her hair. "But I'm not going anywhere. I fought my way through this because I realized something important while I was lying there, unconscious, something about what really matters in life." Olivia exchanges a knowing glance with her daughter-in-law, sensing that Ned has undergone a profound transformation during his brush with death. Over the next few days, as Ned regains his strength and the medical team confirms his heart is healing, something remarkable happens. The man who once lived and breathed for ELQ Industries, who measured his worth by stock dividends and board meeting victories, begins to speak of a radically different future. It starts with a quiet conversation between Ned and Olivia in his hospital room late one evening. "Liv, I need to tell you something," Ned begins, his voice steady despite his physical weakness. "These past few days, lying in that bed, unable to move, unable to do anything but think, it gave me a perspective I've been missing for years." Olivia listens intently, her eyes searching his face for signs of what he's about to reveal. "I've spent my entire life chasing the next deal, the next acquisition, the next victory in the boardroom." Ned continues, "I've poured everything into the business. And for what? So I could have more, do more. I almost died, Olivia. And when that happened, none of that mattered. None of it. The only thing I could think about was you, how much I needed to see your face again. How grateful I was for all those times you stayed by my side, even when I was too wrapped up in business to notice." Tears begin to fall from Olivia's eyes as she listens to her husband's confession. "I don't want to do this anymore," Ned says with quiet conviction. "I don't want to spend my remaining years in conference rooms and strategy sessions. I want to live, Olivia, really live. With you." "Ned, what are you saying?" Olivia asks softly, though she suspects she already knows. "I'm saying I'm stepping away from ELQ," Ned declares. "I'm stepping away from all of it. The business can be Michael's or Drew's or whoever wants to fight for it. I don't care anymore. I want to take you around the world like we always talked about. I want to wake up next to you without thinking about market reports. I want to actually be present in my own life." The shock on Olivia's face is profound. In all their years together, through all their ups and downs, Ned Quartermain has never been anything but a businessman. It's not just what he does, it's been who he is. "Are you serious?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Never been more serious about anything in my life," Ned replies. "I'm going to give my resignation to ELQ. We're going to travel, live. We're going to visit every place we've ever dreamed about. We're going to have adventures. We're going to enjoy the time we have left." When word gets out about Ned's decision, The reaction is swift and varied. Brooklyn is shocked but supportive, relieved that her father's priorities have shifted from the endless corporate battles to what truly matters is health and happiness. "You deserve to be happy, Dad," she tells him, kissing his forehead. "I'm proud of you for making this choice." Michael react with surprise and barely concealed glee, each calculating what Ned's departure from Elk might mean for their own positions. But they keep their observations to themselves, sensing that their father has made a profound decision that has nothing to do with corporate maneuvering. The extended Quartermain clan, used to Ned's constant scheming and business warfare, can scarcely believe what they're hearing. But as they visit him in the hospital, they see something different in Ned's eyes apiece, a clarity they haven't witnessed in years. Most shocking of all to Olivia is the sheer certainty with which Ned speaks about his new plans. He's not wistfully fantasizing about a future he'll never pursue. He's making concrete arrangements, consulting with travel agents even from his hospital bed, and marking destinations on a map with the same focused intensity he once reserved for business negotiations. "Greece first," he tells Olivia one afternoon, pointing to a map. "Remember we always said we wanted to see the islands? Then we'll go to Italy, Spain, Portugal. We can take months. Live. We can take a year. We'll figure it out as we go." Olivia watches this unfold with a mixture of emotions, joy at Ned's transformation, but also a lingering disbelief. The man she married was obsessed with his company, his legacy, his place in the Quartermain empire. The idea that he would simply walk away seems almost too good to be true. Yet as Ned continues his recovery, surrounded by family and speaking with genuine enthusiasm about a life that doesn't revolve around quarterly earnings reports, Olivia begins to accept that this change is real. The heart attack didn't just threaten Ned's life, it fundamentally altered how he sees what makes life worth living. One evening, as Ned sits up in his hospital bed and looks out over the city of Port Charles, he takes Olivia's hand and speaks with the kind of certainty that comes from staring death in the face. "I know this is a shock," he says. "I know I'm not the same man I was a week ago. Maybe I never will be again. But I'm okay with that. I'm more than okay with it. Liv, I almost left you alone in this world. I almost never got to grow old with you. And I'm not going to waste whatever time we have left on business deals." Olivia nods, tears of happiness streaming down her face. She squeezes his hand firmly, and in that moment, they both understand that something beautiful has emerged from this terrible crisis. Ned's brush with death has given him the greatest gift, a second chance, not just at life, but at living it in a way that truly matters. As the sun sets over General Hospital and the Quartermain family celebrates Ned's recovery and his stunning decision to retire, one thing becomes clear. Sometimes it takes facing the end of life to finally understand how to truly live. Next, we will learn about the issue that's tearing Port Charles apart at the seams, the explosive return of Ric Lansing and his sinister game of manipulation that's targeting not one, but multiple families, plus the shocking teen rebellion that's about to destroy Mayor Laura Collins' entire political legacy in one catastrophic night. Buckle up, because the layers of deception, family loyalty, and dangerous secrets are about to collide in ways that will leave you absolutely stunned. Ric Lansing's venomous return to Port Charles. The moment Ric Lansing stepped back into Port Charles, alarm bells should have been ringing throughout every corner of this town. This man doesn't just have a complicated history with his brother Sonny Corinthos, he has a legacy of betrayal, manipulation, and ruthless ambition that spans over 2 decades. What makes this particular return so chilling is the timing. Ric arrived during one of the most vulnerable moments imaginable, the funeral of his own granddaughter, Molly and TJ's baby, who tragically died in that devastating surrogacy accident. But here's where things get absolutely diabolical. While grieving families were still processing their immense loss, Ric was already calculating his next moves like a chess grandmaster positioning pieces for checkmate. The man has positioned himself as someone seeking redemption and family connection, talking sweetly about proving his value to Sonny and rebuilding their fractured brotherhood. Anyone who's watched this show for more than 5 minutes knows that when Ric Lansing talks about proving his value, what he really means is proving he can outmaneuver, outsmart, and ultimately destroy whoever stands in his path to power. The truly masterful part of Ric's current scheme is how he's operating on multiple fronts simultaneously, creating a web of conflicts that even Sonny's legendary street instincts might not detect until it's far too late. He's not just playing one angle, he's systematically attacking Sonny's empire from 3 distinct directions, each more devastating than the last. First, there's the legal warfare. Ric has positioned himself as Ava Jerem's attorney in her custody battle against Sonny for their daughter Avery, meaning he's literally being paid to destroy his own brother in court. The blackmail operation against Alexis Davis. The second prong of Ric's attack is perhaps the most morally reprehensible. He's actively blackmailing Alexis Davis, his ex-wife, and the mother of their daughter Molly, using leverage connected to their granddaughter's death. Think about the psychological torture this represents. Alexis is already drowning in grief over losing her grandbaby, and now her ex-husband is weaponizing the tragedy to manipulate her into compliance with whatever twisted agenda he's pursuing. What could Ric possibly be using as blackmail material? The most likely scenario involves information about the accident itself, perhaps details about Christina's involvement that haven't been fully revealed, or evidence that could implicate Alexis in covering up certain facts to protect her daughters. Ric has always been a master at exploiting legal gray areas and using people's protective instincts against them. He knows that Alexis would sacrifice everything to protect Molly, Christina, and Sam, and he's ruthlessly exploiting that maternal instinct for his own gain. The blackmail operation also serves another crucial purpose in Ric's master plan. It gives him inside access to the Davis family's dynamics and, by extension, to Sonny's inner circle. Alexis and Sonny share decades of history, children, and complicated emotions that never fully disappear, no matter how many years pass. By controlling Alexis through blackmail, Ric gains a potential spy right in the heart of Sonny's support network. He can monitor Sonny's moves, anticipate his strategies, and plant seeds of doubt and discord that will weaken Sonny's position before the final confrontation even begins. The third front, infiltrating Sonny's trust. But wait, there's more. The third and perhaps most insidious aspect of Ric's scheme is the direct approach to Sonny himself, where Ric is actually offering to prove his value and help his brother. This is psychological warfare at its finest. People, after years of bitter rivalry and betrayal, Ric is suddenly playing the reformed brother card, suggesting he wants to rebuild their relationship and be useful to the Corinthos organization. Anyone remember what happened back in 2003 when Ric kidnapped a pregnant Carly Corinthos and held her in a secret panic room in his basement because he was obsessed with having Sonny's baby as his own? That's not ancient history. That's the foundation of who Ric Lansing is at his core. This is a man who let his jealousy and resentment of Sonny drive him to kidnap a pregnant woman and plan to steal her newborn child. That level of obsessive hatred doesn't just disappear because some time has passed. So when Ric shows up now with his smooth lawyer talk and his promises of loyalty, every single person in Port Charles should be running in the opposite direction. But here's the trap that Sonny might actually fall into. He wants to believe in family redemption. Despite everything he's experienced, Sonny still has that core desire for family unity, especially with his biological brother. Ric knows this weakness intimately, and he's exploiting it with surgical precision. The teen rebellion, Charlotte, Danny, and Rocco's dangerous mission. Meanwhile, in a completely separate but equally explosive storyline, 3 teenagers have decided to launch their own amateur investigation that's about to bring multiple families crashing down in spectacular fashion. Charlotte Casadini, Danny Morgan, and Rocco Falconeri, kids from 3 of Port Charles's most prominent families, have discovered something suspicious about Professor Dalton's mysterious laboratory and decided to take matters into their own hands. Let's break down the absolute disaster this represents. These aren't random kids off the street. Charlotte is the daughter of Valentine Casadini and granddaughter of Mayor Laura Collins. Danny is the son of Jason Morgan and Sam McCall, with Sonny Corinthos as his step-grandfather, and Rocco is the son of Police Commissioner Dante Falconeri and Lulu Spencer. When these three teenagers get caught breaking into a laboratory, the fallout doesn't just affect them, it sends shockwaves through the entire power structure of Port Charles. The kids obviously thought they were being clever and heroic, probably imagining themselves as young detectives uncovering some dangerous conspiracy. And to be fair, they might actually be right about Professor Dalton's lab being involved in something shady. But the problem is that they're children playing with adult-sized consequences, and they have absolutely no idea how badly this is about to blow up in their faces. Thursday's spoilers confirm that Rocco gets caught digging around the laboratory and is immediately escorted out by security or authorities, who then move to have him arrested. Can you imagine the panic that must be coursing through this poor kid when he realizes he's about to be arrested? One moment you're playing detective with your friends, the next moment you're in handcuffs facing criminal charges for breaking and entering, trespassing, and possibly tampering with evidence. Dante's impossible position as commissioner and father. The situation creates an absolutely impossible conflict for Dante Falconeri, who finds himself trapped between his duties as police commissioner and his role as father to Rocco and stepfather to Danny. This is the nightmare scenario that every law enforcement officer with children fears having to investigate and potentially prosecute your own family. Dante has built his entire career on integrity, honesty, and upholding the law even when it's personally difficult. He's the cop who went undercover in his own father's organization, who's repeatedly chosen duty over family loyalty when the two conflicted. But this is different. These are children, his children, who made a stupid mistake born from good intentions. How does Dante handle this without either betraying his principles or destroying his relationship with his son? If he gives Rocco special treatment, he compromises his position as commissioner and opens himself up to accusations of corruption and nepotism. But if he treats Rocco like any other suspect, he could permanently damage their father-son relationship and send his teenage son into the criminal justice system with a record that could affect his entire future. Jason Morgan's complicated role. Then there's Jason Morgan, who's dealing with his own complicated position as Danny's father and as someone who's apparently been investigating this very same laboratory. Back in August, Jason delivered a stern warning to Drew Kane about using Danny as a pawn in adult schemes, making it crystal clear that Danny was off-limits for manipulation. Now, just months later, Danny has voluntarily inserted himself into a dangerous situation that involves the exact kind of mysterious organization Jason would normally investigate. Jason must be experiencing a unique mixture of pride and absolute terror pride because his son clearly inherited his investigative instincts and courage. But terror because he knows better than anyone how dangerous it is to go poking around mysterious laboratories in Port Charles. This town has a history of secret facilities conducting unethical experiments from the original DVX, WASB espionage days to more recent biotechnology conspiracies. The fact that Jason himself has been investigating Professor Dalton suggests that whatever's happening in that lab is serious enough to warrant the attention of Port Charles's most legendary enforcer and problem solver. This isn't some academic research facility studying harmless microorganisms. This is something dangerous enough to catch Jason's attention, which means it's dangerous enough to potentially harm 3 teenagers who broke in without backup, weapons, or any real understanding of what they were walking into. Laura Collins' ultimate sacrifice. Now we come to what might be the most emotionally devastating consequence of this entire teen rebellion storyline: Mayor Laura Collins' decision to sacrifice her own political career to protect her grandson Rocco from arrest. Laura is literally in the middle of a major re-election campaign, fighting to maintain her position as Port Charles's mayor against challenger Ezra Boyle, who she already clashed with back in March. This woman has been Port Charles's moral compass for 40 years. She survived being kidnapped by the Casadinis, being frozen in cryogenic suspension, losing children, fighting for her family through countless crises, and building a legitimate political career that gave her real power to protect and serve her community. And now she's preparing to throw all of that away to protect Rocco from the consequences of his actions. What does stopping Rocco's arrest actually mean in practical terms? Laura doesn't have the legal authority to simply override the police commissioner and prevent a lawful arrest, so she's going to have to use political pressure, personal favors, and possibly even abuse her position as mayor to interfere with the criminal justice process. This is exactly the kind of corruption and nepotism that destroys political careers and public trust. Laura knows that she's not naive about politics or consequences, but she's making the conscious choice that her grandson's future is more important than her mayoralty. That's the mama bear instinct overriding everything else. This is the same woman who's faced down mobsters, international terrorists, and evil masterminds without flinching. But when it comes to protecting her family, particularly the children, there's no sacrifice too great. The political fallout and Ezra Boyle's opportunity. The political implications of Laura's decision are going to be absolutely catastrophic. Ezra Boyle, her election opponent, is going to have the greatest campaign gift any politician could hope for: concrete evidence that the sitting mayor abused her power to protect her own family from criminal prosecution. This isn't speculation or rumor. This is documented interference in a police investigation by the city's highest elected official. Boyle won't even need to exaggerate or spin the story. The facts speak for themselves. Mayor Laura Collins prevented her grandson's arrest for breaking into a private laboratory, placing family loyalty above the rule of law. That headline writes itself, and it's political poison. Every voter who ever felt that the wealthy and connected get special treatment while ordinary people face the full force of the law will see this as confirmation of everything they suspected. The tragedy is that Laura's instinct to protect Rocco comes from a place of pure love and family devotion, not from corruption or self-interest. She's not trying to help herself. She's trying to save her grandson from a mistake that could haunt him for the rest of his life. But in politics, motives don't matter nearly as much as actions and optics. And the optics of this situation are terrible. The Britt Westbourne revelation. Now, let's talk about the bombshell revelation that's hiding in Thursday's spoilers. Britt Westbourne is apparently alive and involved in Professor Dalton's laboratory operation. For anyone who needs a refresher, Britt officially died from complications related to Huntington's disease back in January 2023, and her death was a genuinely emotional moment for longtime viewers. But Thursday's spoiler reveals that Britt is not only alive, but is actively working with Professor Dalton and is panicked enough about the teen's break-in to make a desperate phone call to her handler, someone named Sidwell. The spoilers specifically describe Britt threatening this handler, which suggests she's in a position of desperation where threats are her only remaining leverage. What would drive Britt to fake her own death and go underground to work in a secret laboratory? The most logical explanation connects directly to her Huntington's disease diagnosis. Britt spent years knowing she carried the same degenerative neurological condition that killed her adoptive mother, Liesl Obrich's mother, and she watched her own health decline with the terrifying certainty that it would only get worse. What if Professor Dalton's laboratory has developed a treatment or even a cure for Huntington's disease? But the research involves unethical methods that couldn't be conducted through legitimate channels? Britt, facing certain death, might have been desperate enough to participate in illegal medical research if it offered even a slim chance at survival. This would explain why she'd fake her death to escape her previous life and identity so she could fully commit to this underground medical program without anyone interfering. Jason's investigation collides with Britt's secret. The cruel irony here is that Jason Morgan, who once shared a genuine romantic connection with Britt, is now the one investigating the very operation that's keeping her alive. Jason and Britt had real chemistry and mutual respect during their time together, and her death affected him more than he'd probably admit. Now he's hunting her without knowing she's his target, and she's trying to protect her secret without knowing her former lover is the threat. When Jason eventually discovers that Britt faked her death and has been hiding in this laboratory, the emotional reckoning is going to be intense. Will he understand her desperation and try to protect her, or will his code of honor demand that he expose the truth regardless of personal feelings? And what happens when Britt realizes that the teens who broke into the lab include Jason's son Danny? That connection might be the only thing that saves these kids from much worse consequences. Molly's journey toward relief and healing. Amidst all this chaos and betrayal, there's actually one genuinely hopeful thread. Molly Lansing Davis is finally finding relief from the overwhelming grief that's consumed her since losing her baby. This poor young woman has been drowning in trauma for over a year, dealing with the compound disasters of the surrogacy complications, the accident, her baby's death, and the resulting family conflicts that have torn the Davis family apart. Thursday's spoiler that Molly is relieved signals a crucial turning point in her emotional journey. She's finally beginning to process her grief in a healthier way, finding moments of peace, and starting to imagine a future that isn't defined entirely by loss and pain. This is the breakthrough that her mother Alexis, her partner TJ, and her entire family have been desperately hoping for. But here's where the relief becomes bittersweet. While Molly is finally healing, her father Ric is actively using her tragedy as a weapon against her extended family. Ric returned to Port Charles specifically for his granddaughter's funeral, inserted himself into his grieving daughter's life during her most vulnerable moment, and has been systematically exploiting that access to wage war against Sonny, blackmail Alexis, and position himself for some kind of power grab. The Christmas Reckoning. All of these storylines are converging toward what promises to be an absolutely explosive confrontation, probably around the Christmas holidays when Port Charles traditionally experiences its most dramatic revelations and conflicts. Ric's multi-pronged attack on Sonny is building toward an inevitable moment when all his schemes will either succeed spectacularly or collapse catastrophically. History suggests that Ric will eventually overplay his hand that's always been his fatal flaw. He's brilliant at creating complex schemes and exploiting people's weaknesses, but he inevitably gets too confident, pushes too hard, and makes the one mistake that brings his entire operation crashing down. The pattern has repeated multiple times over the past 2 decades. Arrive with legitimate cover, identify vulnerabilities, exploit them methodically, then overreach and face exile or imprisonment. This time the stakes feel even higher because Ric isn't just targeting Sonny, he's weaponizing family grief, manipulating his own daughter's trauma, and attacking from within the family structure in ways that will leave lasting damage regardless of who ultimately wins. When this all explodes, the casualties won't just be Ric and Sonny, they'll include Molly, Alexis, Ava, and potentially children like Avery who become collateral damage in their father's endless war.